Okay, so different kind of question then. Because I'm curious about what the workflow for an insurance agent is. So if I came to you and I was to say, I have a house and I have a car that I want to get insured, we're going to have a consultation and presumably you're going to say, okay, let me get you a few quotes. I'll get those to you promptly. What does that workflow look like for you?
Yeah. Depends. What we typically like to do is have a quick sit down. If somebody's calling in, I can look up some of the information online and then start to ask them questions, assessor sites and stuff that have information. So I can look up some questions just at first glance. And then we tend to like to get copies of what they have prior so that we can quote one quote that's apples to apples, make sure that they understand. And so we make sure to get the driver's licenses and ask any questions about claims that might be in place, what kind of drivers are in the household. And then once we've put the actual quotes together, if we see any gaps, we'll tend to kind of throw a second quote in and say, okay, here's the first one. This is what you have. And this is your apples to apples comparison.
Right.
Here's, with an agent's perspective, what we think maybe you could change to improve things for yourself and make sure that you're better insured. After we've sent those over, I like to ask for the customer to have a sit down and meet and review at that stage.
Gotcha.
So we do the initial collecting of information, and that's just a little get to know you, chit chat about you and your family and what's going on with your situation. Collect all the vital information. And then once it's done, that's something that when I started my company, I've tried to make a priority is the young families that don't know much about insurance yet. Let's go sit down and have coffee. Let's actually sit down, slow it down. I find that when I'm on neutral territory, outnumbered, I get a lot of good questions. When I am sitting in my office, they slow it down a little bit. They don't tend to ask as many questions and they don't leave with as good of an understanding. I do most of the talking.
Interesting.
So I like to meet with people. We still, multiple people drop by on a day to review in the office as well. But meeting in person is maybe a little more old school, but we really like to do it.
So do you think that being an independent agent, you get to operate the way that you see fit? Do you think you have more opportunities to take those conversations like outside the office more so than maybe like an Allstate agent would?
I don't know what their rules are. I would assume they're allowed to do it just the same. I don't know if there's any restrictions in place for that. I know owning my own company, I almost put a coffee cup in the logo. Like I really have a certain way I like to do things and I've kind of stuck with that. And so I really enjoy that opportunity as the owner. But I don't know that it has to do with the independent versus the captive, because I would assume they have the same opportunities.
Gotcha. Because that's one of those things it's kind of interested me. Like the difference between more, I keep using the word corporate, but I think that's a fair word to describe them as the bigger insurance groups versus the smaller, more independent ones. Because it seems to me, with the exception of like Geico and Progressive, their whole thing seems to be, we'll offer you the cheapest insurance possible. You can't beat us. Or at the very least, they'll match you. Fair enough. With some of the bigger ones, maybe more premium agencies, they really rely on the agents themselves. Independents seem to be a lot of the same way. We have a face, you know us, we're in the community. Do you think the playing field between the independent agents and the premium insurance corporations, you guys are playing the same game? Is that about fair to say?
Yeah. I mean, yes and no. When I got started in the industry, I know my very first year I struggled a bit and I out networking and kind of getting to know people, met some other agents that started the same time as me in different places. And none of them stuck. None of them made it. And,
really?
But I know that I say to this day, I insure one of them. He's one of the best insurance agents I've encountered. He just didn't make it. And that it's each place has its own requirements and own expectations. And in his situation, he did really well in certain aspects, but he struggled in others. And independence, we get to make our own rules. So if I'm bringing a producer in to work for me, I get to decide, is this person right? The captives, they might have it more as a numbers specific game. Hey, you did a good job on your home and auto. but you really failed this year in your life insurance. So we don't know that you're going to cut it. And I get to make that call myself now. So
right. Yeah. Cause it really does seem to be a sink or swim kind of market for a lot of people.
It can be.
What do you think the attrition rate for new insurance agents is? Like from year 1 to year 5, how many of them actually make it?
I don't know, but I would say it's not high. I would definitely say insurance is different because you have to invest in your future while kind of starting by struggling today. And it's different. You have layers upon layers upon layers as to what you're building until you're successful. And starting from scratch, it's very difficult to, at least in the personal lines end, it's very difficult to make a great living off of what you're selling until you've got those renewals and the stuff. So you've built up your business. And so in that sense, it's a struggle. You kind of have to know what you're doing. You know, it's long-term. I'll say this too. I told you that I struggled my first year in the business. Part of it, even people I loved and trusted, and I thought trusted me, were hesitant to come over to me. And at the time it didn't feel so good, but as time has gone on, I'm like, oh, I get it. I totally get it. How many of these agents didn't make it? And how many of their family was now stuck with the company that they started with, as they're now doing something completely different. And so I get that there was some hesitation, but what was nice is as time went on, they all trickled in. All the people ended up saying, okay, time has come. I want to shop it around. I'm going to go to my nephew, my friend, my classmate, whatever it was. So,
right. That longevity, it does a lot to build up the confidence that people are willing to put in you.
For sure. For sure.